Hello everyone, and welcome to round 8 of the 2018 Tata Steel Chess Tournament. Here we have Magnus Carlsen with the white pieces playing against English Grandmaster and author Gawain Jones. Gawain Jones won last year's Tata Steel Challengers tournament, so he qualified for this year's Master Tournament. As you all know, there are two tournaments in Vaikanze, the Tata Steel Masters and Tata Steel Challengers. So he won last year's Challengers, and now he's playing with the big boys, and here he faces Magnus Carlsen. Like the title suggests, it's a very interesting game, and the action begins really early, but it also shows that not everything is always as it seems. So Carlsen has the white pieces, and he opens up with e4. We have c5, the Sicilian defense, knight to f3, d6, d4, c captures, knight to f6, and knight to c3. And we have g6. Jones goes for the dragon variation. Bishop to e3, bishop to g7, and f3 now. Carlsen starts the Yugoslav attack, preparing, pawn to g4, pawn to h4, and so on. Knight to c6, queen to d2, and now kingside castle by Jones. Queenside castle by Carlsen, and d5. And here Carlsen decides to play, although there are a lot of options here. You can go for a series of exchanges. Carlsen goes for queen to e1. I will just show one variation because it includes a queen sacrifice for white, so just so you know it if you ever want to play it. If you play, for example, knight captures, then you have b captures and you capture on d5. Knight captures, pawn captures, and queen captures on d5. And it seems white won a pawn and is also attacking the rook on a8. But here black can go queen to c7. White captures the rook, and now bishop to f5, threatening checkmate on c2. And here white gives up a queen. Queen captures on f8, king captures, and now rook to d2. And if you look at this position, white has two rooks for the queen, both players have the bishop pair, and white is also up a pawn. So this position is considered to be equal. If you ever want to maybe play it, use it as a surprise, you have to really know what you're doing here, obviously. Carlsen doesn't go for anything like this. After d5, he plays queen to e1. We have e5 now, and knight captures on c6. This is basically your only move that you can play here. If you try something like knight to b3, you get to d4, and it's not that you're losing a piece. You can simply play bishop to g5, and black can't capture. The pawn is pinned. The rook will capture the queen. But after bishop to e6, preventing the knight from jumping to d5, it's an excellent position for black, regardless of him not winning a piece. So after e5, knight captures on c6. This is the best move. We have b captures on c6 and e captures on d5. And here, probably the best move for black is c captures on d5. You fix your pawn structure, you allow this bishop to be developed freely. Jones goes for knight captures here on d5. And here Carlsen goes for bishop to c4. Pinning that knight. The knight is now attacked 3 times, and also it's pinned. The rook is still eyeing that queen on d8. And as you'll see in the game, this will prove to be very difficult to unpin for Jones. Bishop to e6, defending the knight as it was attacked 3 times, and king to b1. We have rook to e8, and knight to e4 now. We have f5, knight to g5, and bishop to c8, not allowing the knight to capture the bishop, of course. And it's definitely a great position for Carlsen. He has the white pieces. He's definitely ready to push those pawns. The knight on d5 is pinned. Twice it can't move because the queen will be attacked, and also it will be checked from the bishop on c4. And here with a move like h4, everything is great for Carlsen. He's defending the knight on g5, also now is definitely ready to push those pawns. But here, after this bishop to c8 move, Carlsen played g4. And this g4 move actually loses a piece, and it's not that difficult to see why it loses a piece. Here, Jones simply pushed f4. Now, the queen is attacking the knight on g5, and also the f4 pawn is attacking the bishop on e3, and the bishop on e3 was actually protecting the knight on g5. So naturally, instead of g4, h4 defending the knight would have been a preferred move. But if you look at this, here. This g4 move, it blunders a piece, but also it really looks like a very nice tal move. So it's hard to say. I'm sure Carlsen blundered a piece here. He didn't go for a tal move, as I saw a photo of him on Twitter where he, after he made this move and he saw f4, he was very He was not happy. But okay, he goes h4. He doesn't really have a lot to think about here. He has to go all out to justify losing a piece. Jones plays f captures on e3, and we have queen captures on e3. The knight on d5 is still pinned. h6, kicking away the knight, and here we have queen to c5. And here, Jones already won a piece, so does he really want to grab another piece? That's the question. What happens if he grabs the piece? If he grabs the knight on g5, h captures on g5, he gets queen captures on c6. Attacking the rook on a8, there's a triple attack now on the knight on d5, the queen is attacking the pawn on g6, Carlsen would be ready to play h captures on g5 with tempo, so this would result in a very forced variation. Bishop to e6, now the queen is defending the rook, also the bishop is now adding more protection to the knight, so after bishop captures, rook captures, and queen to b6, offering an exchange of queens, queen to c4 probably, threatening some nasty discoveries, queen to e6, and now h captures on g5, and black is better here. I mean, that piece up is still a piece up, but Jones decides not to go for this. So after this queen to c5 move by Carlsen, he plays bishop to b7, now connecting all the heavy pieces on the back rank and defending the c6 pawn with the bishop. Carlsen goes knight to e4, gets his knight out of harm's way, and here we have rook to e6, adding some more protection to these pawns, not allowing ideas like knight to d6, but there were some other moves possible here. Perhaps king to h8, unpinning from this nasty pin, and also moves like bishop to f8 were possible, harassing the queen on c5. But okay, he goes for rook to e6. We have h5 by Carlsen, and here we have queen to b6, offering an exchange of queens. And here we have a beautiful move by Carlsen, one that you really have to find in positions like this, because it's, black is still better. You don't want to make any moves that aren't the best moves. Here Carlsen pushes g5, and what do you do here? It seems like this is a great opportunity for Jones to maybe exchange queens, but that would actually lose the game immediately. If you play something like queen captures, you get knight captures on c5, attacking the rook on e6 and the bishop on b7. If you defend the bishop, you get knight captures, rook captures, and now simply rook captures on d5, winning the piece back, and now white is simply better. Of course, you can't exchange because the bishop grabs with check, you move the king, you lose another rook, and after the rook moves, simply now, for example, bishop to e4, pinning that pawn, and after pawn captures, king moves. They are opposite colored bishops, but there are rooks still in the game, and Carlsen is up 2 pawns, and they are very well protected 2 pawns, so black can never do anything to capture these pawns, and the queenside pawn majority will be too much for black to handle. So this would be winning for Carlsen. So after this g5 move, probably the best idea is bishop to f8. Because bishop to f8 now attacks the queen, of course capturing on b6 favors black, so this forces an exchange of queens. After queen g1, queen captures and rook captures, black would still be up a piece, he would have a better position, but it's hard to say. The bishop on b7 isn't really a star, this rook is still undeveloped, those rooks on g1 and h1 are eyeing that king on g8, it's definitely not a simple position to handle, and Jones was very low on time. He was like 16 minutes and Carlsen had like 45 minutes. So after this g5 move, no capturing the queen, no bishop to f8 was played. Jones plays h captures on g5, and this gives Carlsen a return into the game. He plays queen to a3, not allowing black to exchange any pieces, and we have rook to b8. Now Jones is preparing to move this bishop with tempo, also threaten that b2 pawn. We have b3, and if you look at this position now, black doesn't have a b pawn and black doesn't have a d pawn, so he can never harass this bishop on c4 with a pawn, and this bishop will be a great defender. He completely defends Carlsen's queenside, and he's pinning all of black's pieces. So this bishop on c4, that's definitely Carlsen's strongest piece. That's a monster bishop. So we have queen to d8 here, preparing a move like queen to e7, maybe to exchange queens this way. And I've seen commentators, Ivan Sokolov and Eric Hansen, they were analyzing a move rook d to g1, but seems like queen to e7 solves all of black's problems. But here Carlsen goes for the best move. He plays queen captures on a7, now pressuring the rook on b8, as the rook on b8 is only defended by the queen on d8, so this forces the queen to stay on the back rank. We have g captures on h5, rook captures on h5, and now rook to g6. Trying to defend that pawn not trying to defend the pawn. Of course, the pawn cannot be defended, as the queen is, she has to protect the pawn and the rook on b8. So the pawn isn't really protected, but the rook will be useful after a move like rook to g1 is played. So rook captures on g5 by Carlsen, rook captures and knight captures on g5. Now the queen can't capture the knight, as we've said. Queen captures rook on b8. So queen to c8. Protecting the bishop on b7, so rook to a8 can be played, kicking the queen away. Carlsen goes for rook to g1, we have rook to a8, and now queen to b6. And as you can see, for the entire game, Carlsen is very, very creatively using the idea that this knight on d5 is pinned for the entire game. Rook to a6, kicking the queen even further back, and queen to c5. And we have queen to d7 here. Knight to e4, and this knight to e4 comes with some terrible threats. Of course, the idea is knight to f6 check, the bishop on g7 is pinned from the rook, the knight on d5 is pinned from the bishop on c4, so this would definitely fork the king and the queen and win the game. King to h8, unpin, getting out of the way, and we have queen to f2 now. And queen to e7. Unfortunately, you can't do anything about this rook on a6 being attacked. If you play anything like rook to a8, then you lose to the previous variation. Simply queen to h2, king has to move, and now knight to f6 forks the king and the queen. Both knight and bishop are still pinned. So after queen to e2, queen to e7, getting the queen out of that nasty square. And we have bishop captures on a6, grabbing the rook. Bishop captures, and now queen to h2 check. King to g8, and now queen to h6. Again, taking advantage of Jones' pieces being pinned. We have queen to a7, and now queen to e6 check. King to f8, and now rook to g5. Preparing, of course, rook to f5 check, and this will be winning for white. So knight to e3, defending f5, and we have queen to d6 check. King moves, and here we have knight to c5. And again, a lot of threats here for white. You simply can't stop all of them. Here, the basic threat is queen to e6 check, king moves to f8, and then knight to d7 check. The king has nowhere to go. White wins the queen and the game. Here, Jones played bishop to c8, and here Carlsen played a game-winning move. Feel free to pause the position and try and find the move. It's not a complicated move, maybe a 3-move combination. So feel free to do it. For those of you who managed to find the move, congratulations, you're a great player. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, Carlsen played rook captures on g7. This is with check. You don't really have the option of not capturing the rook, because the rook would also be attacking the queen on a7. So here, king captures, and simply queen captures on e5, checking the king and attacking the knight on e3. King moves, queen captures on e3, now defending the knight on c5. You won the piece back, you are up 3 pawns, and there is no point in continuing this game. Dwayne Jones resigned the game after this beautiful rook captures on g7. So once again, congratulations for those of you who found it. And how does this affect the rankings? It seems that now Carlsen, Giri, and Shakhriyar Mamedyarov are all three of them tied for first place with 5.5 points. Since Giri defeated Mamedyarov in round 8, it was a very nice game. Wasn't even that complicated. Giri just had a better position and he crushed Mamedyarov. So now 3 of them have 5.5 points, and it will be a very, very tied, tournament. So yeah, that's the game. I think all of the games are finished while I'm making this video. Ho Yifan is still playing her game against Fabiano Caruana, so maybe we'll see maybe we'll see a shift of luck for her there. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank James Scalise for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. And I would like to thank all of you for your contributions via Bitcoin and Litecoin, although I have no way of knowing who you are, but thank you, of course. As usual, you can check all my previous videos here. They will both be from the Tata Steel Chess Tournament. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, probably with another video from the Tata Steel Chess Tournament.